The Wonkywoo and the Quest for the Bibbling Rip. The legend begins, as some still do, of the Bibbling Rip and the Wonkywoo. The Bibbling Rip, that clairvoyant fish, could tell you what you want or wish. The Wonkywoo set out to find why the humble he was so maligned, and why the schlicker schmicker schmoo turned from red to green to blue. So, wasting not a moment longer, he began his search just over yonder, where the gribble trees grow, so vast and wild, it's not a place for a human child. For in the trees lurk the pon-pon-clee, who scoff young children gleefully, and grind their bones to make their bread. Wait, isn't that what the giant said? Oojimiflip and anywho, we return at once to the Wonkywoo, who, fearing not the pon-pon-clee, still crept through the woods quite quietly. He found a path and followed that, and met a Zhub-Zhub in a hat, who pointed out the way ahead, then fluffed a petal for its bed. The Wonkywoo bid the Zhub good night, and headed into broad daylight, out of the woods to the Midden Lakes, when came the squeal of rusty brakes, and not so near and not so far was the bubble cur in a bubble car. The Jimmy Junk was close at hand, and kept him cool with a silver fan. The Jimmy Junk, with fan in hand, had come up with a cunning plan to catch the Ripp, that perceptive fish, and make them both quite filthy rich. The bubble cur just dribbled and spat, and fiddled with his rolls of fat. The Wonkywoo, with calm and grace, set off to warn the Ripp with haste. The Bibbling Rip seemed unaware, and splashed about without a care. He splished and sploshed and flicked his tail, and imitated a flugel whale. The Jimmy Junk came on the scene in a sailing boat with a narrow beam, and so his plan was set in motion on this tiny inland ocean. The bubble cur could see the flaw of the Jimmy Junk's plan from back on shore. The Jimmy Junk hadn't thought it through, and quite obviously lacked a crew. The cur mopped his brow with his sweaty socks, then watched the boat strike on the rocks, and with his boat and the Jimmy Junk, the bubble cur's dreams of wealth were sunk. The Jimmy Junk, once on dry land, tried to explain his little plan, but the bubble cur in the bubble car thought the whole attempt was quite bizarre, for the Bibbling Rip had ne'er been caught, and many adventures had come to naught. They returned to their lair as oft before, with no new treasure and a little more poor. The Bibbling Rip swam to where the Wonkywoo was waiting there. "How do you do? I knew you'd come, for you are kind and wise and fun. But because of my clairvoyancy, I know how things are going to be. But I'd like to thank you before you go by telling you what you want to know." So the Wonkywoo and the Bibbling Rip talked for hours of that and this, of wain crows and pupple snaps roaming in pairs, and why the snoffle slew is losing his hair. They talked until the fading light, which meant it was time to say good night. "I'll see you again," said the Rip to the Woo. "You know I know. Well, of course you do.